My friend invited me to a party, and when I arrived, things took a horrifying turn. Later, he falsely accused me of something terrible that happened there. After it all went wrong, I hired a lawyer to fight my case. That's when I uncovered a disturbing truth about my friend. A 29-year-old male, I received a text from my friend inviting me to a party he was hosting. When I accepted, he promised it would be an unforgettable night. As the party began, he announced that he had something special for us. He led us upstairs to one of his 7 bedrooms, where we found a large, cloth-covered object. He slowly unveiled it to reveal a massive cage with a fully grown lion inside. One of the guests, in a moment of sheer stupidity, approached the cage and stuck his hand near it. The usually calm lion was triggered, swiped at the man's hand, and started pouncing on the cage. At that moment, I wanted out. I turned and quickly left the room. As I made my way downstairs, I heard a scream followed by the sound of people running. I bolted out of the house, trying to get as far away as possible. My car was parked a few blocks away, and I sprinted the whole way there. Once I got into my car and began driving home, I sat in silence, thinking about how I could have easily lost my life that night. When I finally made it home, I locked the doors and just sat there, trying to process what had happened. It felt like something out of a nightmare. I tried to calm myself, thinking that I was lucky to have escaped without injury. A few days later, the police called. The incident at the party had been reported, and they were investigating. They told me that someone had been injured and they needed my statement since I was seen at the party. I agreed to share what I saw, thinking that would be the end of it. But then, the officer said something that nearly made me drop the phone. Someone had accused me of bringing the lion to the party. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told the officer that wasn't true and that I wasn't even the host of the party. It was a man named Marcus. The officer informed me that I needed to come to the station for questioning, as several other witnesses claimed otherwise. I knew I needed a lawyer, and the first person that came to mind was my uncle's old lawyer. A few years ago, my uncle was charged with embezzling money from his company. The evidence against him was overwhelming: bank statements, forged documents, everything. Everyone thought he was going to prison for sure, but then the lawyer took on his case. He dismantled the prosecution's evidence piece by piece, finding flaws and inconsistencies no one else noticed. It was like watching a master at work. By the time he was done, not only was my uncle acquitted, but the case had practically collapsed. To this day, I don't know if my uncle was innocent or not, but I knew that this man had saved my uncle's life and career, and from that moment on, our family swore by him. I knew hiring this lawyer, let's call him Tommy, would be expensive, but I didn't care. I needed the best, and Tommy was it. The thought of facing these charges without someone like him in my corner was terrifying, so I picked up the phone and called him. I hoped he would agree to take my case. Tommy and I met before heading to the station. He laid it all out for me: the charges I was facing, how serious they were, and the trouble I could be in if I couldn't prove my innocence. Reckless endangerment and causing harm, I could be looking at serious jail time. When we arrived at the station, they started questioning me about the party, the lion, everything. I told them the truth. I was just a guest and had no idea Marcus had planned something so reckless. But then they started bringing up witnesses. Multiple people claimed they saw me with the lion and said I was involved in bringing it to the party. I was stunned. These people were lying. I kept telling the cops it was Marcus, but the more they pressed me, the more I realized how deep this mess was. Leaving the police station after that interrogation was one of the most surreal moments of my life. I had just spent hours being questioned about something I had nothing to do with, and the cops were treating me like I was guilty from the start. By the time they were done, I was completely drained. As soon as I walked out of the station, there was Tommy waiting for me. He was leaning against his car like this was just another day at the office for him, but I knew better. I knew that behind the calm exterior, his mind was already working overtime to figure out how to get me out of this mess. As soon as I reached him, he didn't ask how it went. He didn't need to. We both knew this was just the beginning. We drove in silence for a while, and I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. Tommy didn't sugarcoat anything. He said it was going to be tough. The first thing we worked on was my alibi, but they already had people saying I did it. Tommy then told me that people lie, especially when they're scared or trying to cover their own butts. He explained that we were going to dig into these so-called witnesses and find out who they really were. But the real key, he said, was finding Marcus, since he was the one who brought the lion in. Tommy laid out the plan like it was nothing. Hearing him talk like that gave me a sliver of hope. Maybe there was a way out of this after all. Tommy and I started digging into what really happened that night. A few days into the case, Tommy called me into his office. As soon as I sat down, he cut straight to the point. He told me that he had figured out what Marcus was up to. It was all about his social media. I didn't understand the connection between social media and the lion until Tommy explained that Marcus was known on Instagram for throwing these extravagant parties. They were popular, and it's how he built his brand. But a few months ago, his social media engagement took a nosedive after an incident at one of his parties, where something happened to one of the girls, and he did nothing about it. They tried to cancel him, and they succeeded. His likes, comments, and shares were way down, which was a big problem for him since he relied on that for his income. Tommy showed me screenshots of the stats on his computer. Marcus was desperate and knew he had to do something big to go viral again. That's why he brought out that lion. This wasn't just some fun party trick, it was a calculated move. He had been planning it for weeks, reaching out to a dealer to rent the lion and setting up the whole stunt down to the last detail. He was banking on the chaos to make the party go viral, get people talking about him again, and boost his engagement numbers. It all started to click in my mind. Marcus had always been obsessed with his image and being the guy everyone talked about, but lately he wasn't getting the attention he craved. So he decided to do something outrageous that people couldn't ignore. I asked Tommy how he found out all of this, and he told me. He had uncovered key pieces of evidence, emails, text messages, and even social media posts that hadn't gained much attention at the time. Marcus had even dropped hints in some of his posts, making comments about how his next party would be legendary and unforgettable. At the time, no one thought much of it, but now it all made sense. Tommy told me this was how we were going to prove my innocence. Marcus wasn't just throwing a party, he was orchestrating a viral event. But when everything went wrong, he needed a scapegoat. Since I was one of the few sober people at the party, I guess I was the easiest target. But now we had the evidence to show it was all his idea from the start. Hearing Tommy lay it all out was both infuriating and a relief. It made perfect sense now, but even with that evidence, things kept getting worse. I started receiving creepy anonymous messages telling me to drop the investigation. Someone even tried to break into my apartment one night. I knew Marcus and his buddies were behind it, trying to scare me off, but I wasn't backing down. Finding the lion dealer to testify against Marcus wasn't going to be easy. After all, it's not like there's a directory for people who rent out exotic animals, but Tommy was determined, and once he had an idea in his head, he didn't let go. He knew that if we could track down the person who supplied the lion, we could link everything back to Marcus and finally start clearing my name. It all started when Tommy found a trail of breadcrumbs on Marcus's social media and a few of his emails. He discovered a series of encrypted emails between Marcus and an anonymous contact discussing special arrangements for the party. "I've got a lead," Tommy said. These emails Marcus sent, they're encrypted, but we managed to decode enough of them to see that he was in contact with someone shady. They mentioned a meeting in a private chat on an encrypted messaging app, but here's the thing, Marcus isn't exactly a tech wizard. And he didn't cover his tracks as well as he thought. Tommy pulled up a map on his computer, showing a cluster of dots around a sketchy part of town. He met this person in an industrial area on the outskirts of the city, a place known for black market deals. "It's a long shot, but I've got a plan," Tommy said. We went to the area, mostly filled with rundown warehouses and shady businesses. Tommy started asking around, subtly at first, pretending to be someone interested in renting an exotic animal for an event. Most people brushed us off, but eventually, word got around and someone pointed us to a guy named Rick. After a few days of digging and following up on leads, we found Rick in a dingy warehouse on the edge of town. The place reeked of animal musk and decay, and as soon as we stepped inside, I felt nauseous. Tommy approached him with caution, knowing we had to play this just right. Rick eyed us suspiciously. We told him that a friend of ours recently rented a lion, and we were trying to do the same. We mentioned that our friends sent us, and when Rick asked who, we said it was Marcus. As soon as he heard that name, he relaxed. We then asked Rick if he could give us the rundown on the price and how he knew Marcus. Rick hesitated but then shrugged. He told us that Marcus came to him a few weeks before the party, saying he needed something big that would get people talking. Rick warned him that a lion wasn't exactly a petting zoo attraction, but Marcus didn't care. Marcus paid him a small fortune for the lion and didn't ask too many questions. Tommy and I exchanged a quick look, a look that said, "We've got him." Rick's confession tied everything together. Marcus had sought out the lion dealer himself, paid top dollar, and set the whole thing in motion. It was the final piece we needed to prove that Marcus had set up the stunt from the very beginning. After getting Rick's testimony, we headed to Marcus's neighborhood. I remembered that one of his neighbors had a doorbell camera that pointed directly across the street from Marcus's house. When we got there, we asked the woman living there if we could check her footage due to the incident. She agreed, and lo and behold, the camera had captured Marcus leading the lion into his house before the party. The footage was clear as day. It showed Marcus handling the lion and bringing it inside. The closer we got to revealing the truth, the more desperate Marcus became. It was clear the walls were closing in on him, and he knew it. But instead of backing down, he pressed me more. At first, it was just anonymous threats and nasty messages left on my phone and a brick through my apartment window. But then things took a terrifying turn. One evening, after gathering evidence with Tommy, I was driving home. The day had been exhausting, but we were making progress. I was just a few blocks from my apartment when I noticed something was off. I pressed the brake pedal, but instead of stopping, nothing happened. The pedal sank to the floor with no resistance. My heart skipped a beat as I realized what was happening. I had no brakes. Panic set in as the car picked up speed. The streetlights blurred past as I gripped the steering wheel and yanked the emergency brake. The car skidded, tires screeching as it swerved uncontrollably, but at least it was slowing down. I fought to keep it from crashing and steered hard to avoid oncoming traffic and parked cars. Finally, the car came to a stop, inches away from slamming into a tree. I sat there trying to catch my breath and process what had just happened. It didn't take a genius to figure out that this wasn't an accident. Someone had tampered with my brakes. And there was only one person desperate enough to do something like this. Tommy was furious when I told him what happened. "This is beyond reckless. This is attempted murder," he said. Tommy told me we'd get my car examined, and if we found proof of tampering, we'd have Marcus on even more charges. With the footage, the dealer's testimony, and everything else we had, we went back to the cops. This time, they couldn't ignore the evidence. Marcus was arrested for endangering lives, reckless endangerment, and trying to frame me for the whole mess. He was screwed, and there was no way out for him this time. After everything came to light, the charges against me were dropped, and I was cleared of any wrongdoing. But the whole experience left me shaken. I had been dragged through hell for something I didn't do, and it almost ruined my life. Marcus ended up facing a laundry list of charges and was looking at serious prison time.